So there is a greater responsibility to us individuals in third world countries to properly manage our money. Hi everyone, this is Charm again and welcome back to my channel where we talk about personal finance, entrepreneurship, and adulting how-tos. When I first started to learn about personal finance, most of my resources and content creators that I watched were all centered around the United States. That's actually why I created this channel. I wanted to create personal finance content that's more geared towards Filipinos and the Philippine economy or the Philippine financial environment. And because my exposure to personal finance was mainly in the US, I realized that when applied to the Philippines, our financial literacy scene is not really as sophisticated yet. I don't typically like comparing unless there's a lesson to be learned. So in this particular video, let's compare some financial literacy habits of Filipinos and Americans, and I will be breaking them down into the 6 steps of personal finance that I've talked about in my book right here. Let's compare them in the categories of earnings or income, savings, spending or budgeting, protecting, managing debt, and investing. So, if you've read my book, you know that I highly encourage people to take this one step at a time. But for this video, I kind of want to do it in reverse. Let's discuss step 6 first, investing, and then gradually go to step 1, which is earning or income. So, without further ado, let's start this video. So there were a lot of research that went into this video, so I'll be telling you guys a lot of statistics. Don't worry, I'll put all the resource materials down below. So for context, the US population is at around 330 million as compared to a third of that, which is the Philippines with 110 million. And the average age of Americans is at 38.1, and the average age of Filipinos is at 25.7. So we have a much younger population as compared to the US. When it comes to investing, let's take a look at the stock market, for example. Only 1.27% of Filipinos are invested in the stock market. And it's been at less than 1% in the last decade. So the growth is also really slow. And even with other investments, because of course the stock market is not the only type of investment, 75% or 54 million Filipino adults don't have any investments at all. Now let's compare this to the US, wherein 56% of American adults own a stock, right? As compared again to the 1.27% of Filipinos. Now, it has been reported that that percentage hasn't really moved much in the past decades. But again, it's a big disparity from Filipinos wherein we almost don't invest at all. Now, maybe it probably helped that the US stock market is the biggest in the world with the most stocks, so they have a lot of brands to choose from. So what's the big picture here when it comes to comparing these two countries when it comes to investing? It means that the idea of using investments to achieve financial freedom here in the Philippines is very rare as compared to the US. And this actually results to a more active and profitable stock market economy wherein people have more opportunities for growth. Now, I'm not discouraging Filipinos to invest in the Philippine stock market, but I personally have found more opportunities and growth in the US stock market. And with all the financial aspects that we're going to be talking about today, it is with the investing area that Filipinos have the biggest disparity with the Americans. It's for that reason that I appreciate when Filipinos have the same opportunity as with Americans, or in this case, the US stock market is accessible to Filipinos as well through Shari Shari. Shari Shari is a platform designed with Filipino beginner investors in mind. It is the first company registered in the Philippines to provide Filipinos access to over 2,500 US stocks and hundreds of ETFs. It is also regulated by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and again, because it is a Filipino company, you can reach out to them or talk to their customer service in any language, may it be Bisaya, English, Tagalog. They have customer service representatives that can understand us. So some features of Shari Shari. First is that Shari Shari is more affordable because they charge flat fees, meaning that they are not charging by percentage and funding is not charged by percentage. Next is that when you trade with their partner US broker-dealer, there are no commissions and no spreads. Next, and this is an exciting update from my past video that I made about them, they actually have a no subscription tier now. So the Libre plan, no cap na siya and wala na siyang limit. This already comes with a lot of great features like market data and simple charts. But of course, if you guys want more features, you can also upgrade to their paid tier. Another is that you can access Shari Shari both from your desktop or your mobile, unlike other apps wherein you have to access them through your mobile kasi naka-application siya. Ito, it's really easy to log in. It's very user-friendly. Para ka lang nag-a-add to cart. And again, you don't have to download anything na. You just need to access it through a browser. And lastly, and I think this is one of the biggest advantages of being a Philippine registered company, there's a lot of funding options and you don't need to open a US bank account na. Yung mga bank accounts nyo ngayon, you can probably fund with those peso accounts like Union Bank, Metrobank, BDO, BPI, RCBC, or you can even fund using e-wallets like Maya, GCash, Coins.ph, as long as they are part of the InstaPay or PesoNet PCHC networks. So yeah, if you guys are interested to get started in investing in the US stock market, definitely check out Shari Shari. I will put the link here and down below in the description. I will also pin them in the comments so that you guys can get started in opening an account. I have a lot of stock market videos also. I'll pin them up here. Thank you again, Shari Shari, for collaborating with me in this portion of the video. Now let's continue comparing Filipinos and Americans with our step number 5, which is debt management. So this is where I kind of found it really interesting. So first are Filipinos. 41% of Filipinos have loans, and as compared to the US, a lot of Filipinos go the informal route, borrowing from friends, families, or even mga 5-6, right? Which consists of 44% of those 41% borrowing from informal lenders. Now, one of the main reasons is that Filipinos find it hard to accomplish the requirements needed to process a formal loan, and not a lot of Filipinos, less than 3% of Filipinos have access to a credit card. Now, if you look at the statistic right here, 55% of those who loan it for daily consumption, like rent, food, utilities, and etc. Now, when you borrow for daily needs, it makes sense that there is fear attached to borrowing or loaning money because you are using it for survival. Now let's compare it to the US. If the Filipinos are scared of debts, Americans are too comfortable with debt, with 77% of American households having at least one debt. And as compared to the number of Filipinos who borrow money informally, only 8% of Americans borrow this way either to friends or families. And 69% of Americans say that borrowing money actually made their lives better as compared to the 8% that say that borrowing money made their life or financial situation worse. Now, majority of Americans borrow for 3 main reasons. First, being personal, or that includes student loans. Second is credit cards, which could include consumer debts. And lastly is for home equity or mortgage. Now, the big picture that I see when it comes to debt is that Filipinos are afraid of debt while Americans are too comfortable with debt. And both aren't necessarily good or bad. I feel like we have to find a healthy balance or a healthy middle ground between these two. When it comes to borrowing money, again, it's not bad to borrow money. It is just a tool. It is up to you whether you use it to progress you in your personal finance or to hold you back. Okay, now let's talk about step number 4, which is protection. When it comes to protection, it's mainly 2 things. Emergency savings, or being to afford, accidents or emergencies, or insurance. So, when it comes to emergency savings, let's talk about that first. In the Philippines, 56% of Filipinos are saying that they are putting more money away for emergencies or their emergency fund. This is mostly brought about by the pandemic, but also 46% of Filipinos say that they can't pay in full their next loans or bills. But what's interesting is, in the US, 56% of Americans also say if they were faced with a $1,000 emergency or around 55,000 pesos, then they would not be able to pay for that as well. Now, when it comes to insurance naman, Filipinos have the record high of having microinsurance. We are now at 48.8%. So that's around 53 million Filipinos that are covered with microinsurance. Also, more than a quarter of Filipinos say that they want to allocate more funds into their insurance. Of the 48.8% that has microinsurance, which includes, insurances that are free from work, PhilHealth, and stuff like that, only less than 3% of Filipinos are insured na sapat talaga yung coverage. Let's compare that to the US, wherein 91.7% of Americans have some form of health insurance. Now, the big picture for protection is that Americans have way more people insured, especially because they have a better health insurance system in their government as well as compared to the Philippines. But also, a lot of Filipinos are so afraid of getting insurances. Typically, people don't really follow the saying, prevention is better than cure, right? It's really hard to set aside money and save for the rainy days, and people really prefer to just, try to solve it when the problem arises, which is also not good. Now, let's move on to the more basic ones, starting with step number 3, which is budgeting or spending. Only 60% of Filipinos keep track of their expenses and plan out their budget. And as compared to the 60% of Filipinos, 86% of Americans keep track of their income and expenses monthly. One of the advantages of living in a third world country is that our expenses are typically lower. Of course, kasama na din yan, medyo lower than yung minimum wages natin. But it is still reported that Americans are much better at tracking their income and expenses and budgeting, which, if we live in a country where wages are lower and even if cost of living is also lower, we should be the ones who are more diligent when it comes to budgeting. Next, let's talk about savings. So, more than half or 52% of Filipinos are reported to not have savings, and those that do have savings don't really know what to do with it. Another statistic is that 29% lang of Filipinos have banks, right? So, it is one of the lowest in Southeast Asia. Most Filipinos that reported to not have savings said that the reason for that is that there is really not enough money to save. However, there are also other reasons that attribute to that, like for example, lack of financial literacy, the bahala na attitude of Filipinos, and even the YOLO mentality. For Americans naman, it is reported that 21% do not set aside their annual income for long-term or medium-term goals. And those who do save don't really save much. 20% of Americans are reported to only save 5% of their income, while 28% save 6 to 10% of their income. Only 16% of Americans save at least 15% of their income, but as studies show, we really need to save at least 20% of our income to be able to have enough money for emergencies, for our investments, and to eventually retire. It has been reported that a lot of Americans got to save a lot of money during the pandemic, pero nababawi din right now because of inflation. 67% of Americans reported to have dipped into those savings because of rising prices due to inflation. And 81.5% of US households are reported to have bank accounts. So what's the big picture here? Interestingly enough, both Filipinos and Americans are not very good at saving. But there's a major factor that has to be considered when it comes to saving here. The US has a better social service and welfare package as compared to third world countries like the Philippines. So there is a greater responsibility to us individuals in third world countries to properly manage our money. And lastly, let's talk about earning or our income. So for the Philippines, out of the 110 countries reviewed, we are at 95, which is pretty far, at around 15,200 pesos as an average salary. So it's very far from the number one, which is Switzerland, which has 296,000 pesos average salary. The US is the third with 174,000 pesos as annual salary. So the average salary in the Philippines is 161,847.6 per year. The median salary is at 655,200 pesos per year. And the average salary of a Filipino BPO employee is 375,000 pesos per year. So a big chunk of our growing economy is the online gig economy. So yung mga freelancers, diba? Lalo na nung pandemic, work from home, right? So we have around 1.5 million Filipinos that are freelancers, or that's around 1.4%. But that number is actually growing really fast. In the US naman, the salaries they differ based on Americans' educational level. If you have some level of high school education, that's around $18,000. If you graduated high school, that's around $30,000. Ang laki ng jump ah. Yung may mga bachelor's degree is at around $81,000, and those with a graduate degree earns around $116,000. Now, with their online gig economy, these are the statistics. The big picture that I want to share with you guys is that ang layo ng income natin from Americans. That's for sure a fact. And this is mostly because we are living, again, in a third world country, right? It's not as easy to get higher salaries than it is in the US. But again, this also equates because of our cost of living. Mas mura kasi to live in the Philippines as compared to the US then. And unfortunately, that's why Filipinos have to hustle harder and smarter to be able to bring in more money. For years, it's been very common for Filipinos to look for greener pastures in countries like the US to be able to earn more, or that's why we have a lot of OFWs, right? Another interesting thing is our online gig economy. In the Philippines, most of the people who do hire us are from out of the country. So most of our employers are in the US, in the Canada, Australia, for example. And they want to hire Filipinos mostly for technical and creative services. This is different from the US, wherein their online gig economy connects people locally for services related to convenience, right? Making deliveries, performing household tasks or running errands, driving or ride-hailing app, shopping for or delivering groceries or household items, and doing something else. This is an interesting thing, and it's mostly, I think, because people in the working class in the US, blue-collared workers, stuff like that, they're all very techy, they're all very familiar with the internet, and they're all very comfortable with looking work through the internet. While here, it's mostly the middle class who is more comfortable with finding work and communicating through the internet, and that's why our blue-collared workers are not as updated yet or is not as competitive yet. Although I know that we have a lot of ride-hailing apps, delivery apps, mga ganyan din, but the percentage is mostly yung mga freelancers that do creative or technical services talaga. Okay, so I feel like ang dami ko ng statistics na sinabi. I've been filming here for like 2 hours already. But I wanted to share with you guys that despite having really different economies, both Filipinos and Americans have to work on getting better at their personal finance. We all need to make a personal effort to improve our personal finances. Filipinos typically still focus on the first 3 steps: earning, saving, and spending or budgeting, while Americans, despite not being an expert yet at the first 3 steps, they are already more comfortable and more familiar with the next 3 steps, which is protecting yourself, managing your debt, and investing. And that's why us Filipinos, even though we haven't mastered the first 3 steps yet, we shouldn't be afraid to leverage debt, to invest, to protect ourselves through insurance, right? So that, I think, is the biggest lesson to be learned in this video or in this comparison, is that despite being in a third world country and despite earning less, it doesn't mean that we should relax and not pay attention to the more advanced steps of personal finance. I hope that you appreciated this research-intensive video, and I hope that you got some insight on it. If you guys want to read up on my book with the 6 steps of personal finance, I will put the Shopee link down below so that you guys can buy it. It's also an undated planner, perfect for the holidays as a gift, and perfect to use for any time, especially mag-New Year na, right? And also, again, check out Shari Shari, wherein you can invest in US stocks for as low as $1. And I will also link them down below. If you appreciated this video, then please click the thumbs up, share this video to your friends and family, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring the notification bell so that you get notified every time I upload another video. Again, I know that adulting can be hard. Personal finance doesn't have to be. That's why I love making these videos for you guys. This is Charm again, and I will see you on my next video.